Hello my friends, John LaRuffa here with another straight up solo, and in this episode we're going to take a look at Perdition's Mouth, Abyssal Rift, and I'm going to show it to you from a solo standpoint, of course. This is the revised edition. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay folks, and as usual, please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already. And if you haven't, really do appreciate the support. Thank you very much. So Abyssal's Rift is a solo slash co-op game. You can play with 1 to 6 players. And if you're playing with 1 player, you have to play with 3 characters. Or they say you could play with 2 characters, but you could use like a ghost peg here to take some of the little bit of the stuff, like the actions out. But I'm not doing that. I'm playing with 3. And I think 3 is manageable. And it's an interesting situation. So what this game's about is it has a ton of scenarios, okay? So I've just set this up kind of generically. This isn't mid-game. I've already played a game and finished the game, and then I'm like, I'll set this up kind of so I can explain what I'm doing. But you have one of these scenarios, and it tells you how to set the board up, what about a little bit of rules reminder stuff, the story here, and this is just the starter one, so there'd be no spoilers or anything. And then how to build a couple of these different pools. And you've got a primary spawning pool, a secondary spawning pool, and then a reserve pool. And then throughout the game, you're going to kill certain, well, as you kill monsters, they go to this pool over here with the triangle, which is where they go when they're defeated, okay? Now, you also have your main board, which is always going to be some map like this, and it's going to have a couple of overlays for like doors and stuff. Here, that one could be closed for good measure. There's usually a place where you print it on the board where you can have spawning locations where things are going to spawn, come into play. There's going to be a spot where the acolytes go to try to run and increase the threat alarm, which means things will spawn faster as you go throughout your campaigns. Then you have your characters. So I've got 3 playing characters right now, this one, and this one, and this one. And then you have the enemies around them. And in many ways, it is like a dungeon crawler that you would know. Line of sight, movement, attack, defense, etc. Action points is how you do stuff. But this game is completely different in regards to how you actually take actions. That's where this rondel comes in, which I'll explain in just a second. I do want to point this out. So each character is going to have a character sheet. The character sheet is going to have hit points that go down top to bottom. And as you start losing hit points, things change. In the case of the Berserk human over here, Tyra, she actually gets stronger in regards to her attack power, but weaker in defense and fewer actions as you go lower in health. So she gets more and more angry. But these other characters, like the healer over here and my wizard, they predictably kind of go down in all aspects as you go down. The range stays the same. These 2 are range characters. But basically what happens in this game is that you're having 2 situations going on. You have your health over here. You also have wound cards that you get. And the wound cards stick with you from game to game, whereas the health will be healed as you go through, I believe. Pretty sure that's true. I know the wound cards stay. And then the way the wound cards work is you have to play them to get rid of their penalties. Now, how does this work? So what's happening in this game is that you basically have 2 main phases. You have the hero phase, and then you have the enemy phase. And the hero phase, you will, in any turn order you want, spend your action points, which are generated based on your place for your health, and you'll move around the spokes on this rondel. And when you move around, wherever you stop, it's not for the holes, it's for the entire spoke. Wherever you stop will be what you do on your turn. For instance, if I was to move this one here, and I wanted to take an attack action, I would skip this space because there are no open spots. This doesn't cost me anything to move over. And I would put my peg right here, and I would actually turn it in, showing that I'm taking my turn. I could draw a card and then I would attack. And in order to attack, I have to be in range of an enemy, 1 or 2 away, or 1 to 6, depending on some of these other, the other characters. And then, if I have action points left, I can spend 2 action points per strength to move up on my strength of my hit, including I can spend cards that have the fist symbol to add to that. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to get enough hit power or attack power to overcome the enemy's defense. So for instance, if I wanted to hit this guard and I did just what I said there, I would draw a card, and this one has a something I could play. Sometimes these are special. They talk about different things that are going on. There are cards that have these icons here that is specifically for the special action. You could always play any card you want for just one of anything, one of any move or defense or attack. And so there's a way to do that too, one for your special, etc. But here, like for instance, I want to generate some attack on this guard. So this guard is in range 2. 1, 2, I can see him, so I can make an attack. And my strength is, or my base hit power is 5, or attack power is 5. Now what's going to happen is I know based on this sheet that this guy's defense power is 2. The issue is that I have to exceed whatever that defense power is, and we're going to draw this card, which can have a result from -1 through up to 5 in the way this deck is configured. And so I've got to overcome that, otherwise I don't do any damage. Let's say I want to overcome it. I want to play this card right here. I could play this card, generate 3 more, so that would mean I'd have 8. And I could also add, because I only went 1 action space, so that I have 3 more. I could also add 1 more, so this would be 3 plus 5 plus 1 is 9. That's pretty overkill, but let's say I'm going to do that. I would then draw this card. Ooh, plus 5. Wow. So luckily I did overkill because that makes it 7. So he would take a wound, and I would put the wound token under him, okay? He has 2 health. If I kill him, he goes to this spot right here. But he is not degraded like I am when I take hits. He is just wounded 1, okay? And so that's how the attack works, just like you'd expect, right? But you don't draw cards unless you're able to. And the only way you're able to draw cards is with the actions that show drawing cards. Now, when you take all of your turns, you can attack, you can move, you can sprint, you can defend. There's some other variations on those things. You can even rest, and when you rest, basically discard whatever's left in your hand, put it into, you take your discard pile, shuffle it in with your deck, and then draw up to your, not your hand limit, but draw your starting draw value right there. And you can only have a maximum of certain amount of cards, in this case 7 for any of these. Now I'm going to give you a full rule breakdown, but what I will tell you is that this whole system here really leads to this game being very puzzly, because it's not as easy as, oh, I move and then I attack, and I move and I attack, and I move and I activate. Because there's only a couple places that you can move here, you can sprint here, you can charge here, and maybe a special. And that looks like a lot, but let me tell you, these action points, especially for some of the characters, are a little bit hard to come by, especially as you get wounded or you get fatigued. You have some pretty tight turns you have to deal with. And so a lot of this is trying to figure out, well, how am I going to make this all work, given that I don't have complete freedom, all right? Now, the enemies, when they activate, the way they do it is they flip over a card, like this one says +2. That means that they're going to take 2 actions. And first I would do this one right here, it was just spawn, so I do a spawn action. And then I would do a move action. But depending on what this says, you know, they could take a bunch of actions, they could take just a couple actions. When they do take actions, they're very easy to actually accommodate. You look at what they tell you they're going to do here, and that tells you, and this is the standard, but that would basically tell you how far they're going to move, what their range is, what do they try to do. So like the guards try to stay at range 3 if at all possible, so they stay away from you, and what is their base attack and base defense. So there's a lot of different things there. This is hard. If you really wanted to jack it up, you could, you know, add to that. But boy, this game's already pretty hard. I wouldn't necessarily jump right into that. And so basically how you win is you go to the escape point. You've got to basically get to the spot that you're trying to escape. But as you can expect, there's all sorts of things happening and getting in your way, and there's different terrain that's going to slow you down from action points. And you're trying not to just let the monsters go completely unchecked, because let me tell you, they will saw you in half if you don't deal with them. So you're trying to figure out, how do I play these cards? How do I maximize my action points? How do I deal with the rondelle here and do not spend too much time just jumping, or I should say too many action points jumping from one side to another, and I won't get very much on my turn. Maybe I can figure out how to maximize a sprint here. And also you can help and aid other people depending on how far they are away. You can play cards on their behalf, and the further you're away, the little bit less of an effect the card can give you. There is an awful lot of different cards, and each character plays substantially different because, for instance, this is a healing character, and I have this, action here that allows me, this is one true command, so I can play after drawing a response card, which benefits the enemy. I could discard that, draw another one. That's a one-time use, then I can't use it again for the scenario. But there's other ones in this deck here that let me heal, and take away some of those bad cards from the wound cards from other people. Or it's a standard Heavenly Blessing, which this is standard heaven, that's funny. But this can be used as anything. It's just a value of 3, so I can use it to boost all these different actions, mine or others. And see, like this Master of Faith, that's a 4. Well, I could toss this over if I needed to help out somebody else, depending. This guy doesn't like aid unless they play a special card. This guy has some reductions in the help. But you can work together, and you need to work together to try to figure out how it's going to work out and how you're going to accomplish this pretty challenging puzzle of a dungeon crawler. So there's a lot of cool things here. It was funny because as you start the game, you feel like, oh man, I'm going to waltz through this. And then as the game goes, especially if they draw some pretty large cards, I've got a couple +2s here, but if they draw a 5, that's a ton of different actions. Things can change in a dime for you. And so you really got to expect the worst, prepare for it, and figure out how you're going to get to that exit and how you're not going to let the game get progressively worse on you. So the thing with the acolytes, or the acolytes, they're basically trying to sprint to the spot. Every time they get there, they raise this variable threat value, which will continue throughout the entire campaign, up over and over. And it's at 1 right now, which means when you spawn 1 enemy. But if it goes to 2 or 3 or 4, you can see how you're going to be spawning, it maxes out at 5, but spawning out a ton of enemies every time it hits these spokes, which are, half and half of that wheel. So you got to really be careful not to just let things, go. So lots going on. Each of these characters has specific powers. In the revised edition, there are 7 different heroes you can play with, and there is a combination of melee and ranged and magic, etc. The kinds of things you'd expect. And what I would recommend for people who are playing, who are learning the game or starting off, I'd recommend doing this first scenario with a very, just play it with a simple group of, one melee, one range, one healer, etc., and get the feel for the game, and then go back and look at the decks in here and see more on the specifics of which characters will be really fun for me that will play the campaign that I want to play it and a way I want to play it. Because I definitely could see that, okay, some of these things are cool. Some of them, maybe I don't want to play this way. Maybe I'd rather be more of a hard hitter than a tank, or maybe I want more of this, range damage, and I'm going to find a way to deal with lots of people at a distance, etc. So there's just like anything else, but because this is a campaign game, you're going to be able to swap in and swap out different heroes. But if they die, you can't use them again unless you use one of the variants. And so this beginning scenario helps you get the feel of what these characters play like, without introducing a ton of extra stuff, treasure chests and different traps and different types of doors, etc., and lots of different monsters. This one is a nice bite-sized beginning where you can try different things and say, okay, I'm good, now I'm going to step out, continue the campaign. And like I said, there is a ton of different scenarios here. There's many scenarios in the box. There's several campaigns in the box, so it's not like you just play through. This isn't a 5 whatever scenario campaign. There's several different ones. For instance, you start at the side entrance, that gets you going on one angle. If you start through the main entrance, that gets you going on another one. So this one would, go to the Abyssal Rift scenario 5, whereas if you play this one, it goes to the Abyssal Rift scenario 4 instead. So there's branching different things in here that you can do. All right. So let me tell you what I think about it. So having never played the original, not the revised edition, I'm not exactly sure how this compares to that. But I found that while there are a decent amount of rules in here, they're not difficult to digest, especially once you start playing your first game. And they're all very well summarized. It looks like a wall of text, but this is extremely handy. I would say that this game, once you get the hang of it, which you'll get the hang of after just a few turns, it becomes very approachable and actionable. There are not a ton of nitnoid things that you got to understand. You get the system down and it plays very nicely. Where the real learning comes in is, how do I maximize my turns? How do I actually survive these things? How do I do well? What is it going to take for me to make clever moves and combos? That's where there's a lot to learn. So I would say this game is, I wouldn't say it's easy to learn, but it's reasonable to learn, but it's very tough to master from a standpoint of there's a ton that you have to think about when it comes to synergies in this game. And you also have to remember, I kind of didn't really pay attention too much to this till I got into, halfway through the first game I played. You can play these cards for a +1 for anything. So even if I have a card that I don't feel like I'm ever going to use because it's very circumstantial, I might just want to play it to use it so that when I come to that rest area, I can rest, get a full new hand of cards, and have not just sat on this card and not used it for a while. And so there's a lot of flexibility there. And the big part of this game is understanding, I don't want to over damage the monster, but boy, do I want to land that hit, because every hit is just one damage. It's one wound. And so if a monster has 2 or 3 wounds or 2 or 3 health, you're going to have to attack him successfully 2 to 3 times. And that is going to be a lot of coordination if you want to get that done without him coming back and, giving you a 1-2. So there's a lot going on with how you use your action points. There's a lot going on with how you play your cards. And there's an ability to really do some combo-like things, especially when you put different heroes next to each other and try to play off that. And also, it's very interesting that you'll see, depending on how the monsters go, maybe they won't get a big turn. Maybe they're just going to move, and they won't even attack. Maybe they will. Maybe they'll move, attack, and move. Maybe they'll, attack, move, attack. You don't really know what you're going to get. So sometimes there's that sigh of relief, like, oh, it's only a +1. That's a simple thing. I can deal with it. But or maybe it's just a move and spawn, okay. And the other thing is, you're in close quarters here, so there's a puzzle even about how do I kind of move around and get where I need to go and deal with the terrain that is mostly there to slow you down. So it's not a ton of modifiers. It's not like a whole thing that you got like this big deal, +1, -1, -1, +1, and I appreciate that because there's plenty going on already. I like that you're basically you're for the most part adding to what you're doing, except when you play a wound card where you'll be subtracting. And when you're playing those cards, it's the only way to get them out of your hand. And some cards, there's infestation cards. If you draw 2 of those at the same time, you immediately die and then a bug spawns out of you. So you really don't want that. So there is an impetus to flush these things out of your deck as soon as you can, so you don't have to deal with some severe consequences. The thing that I don't appreciate yet enough is how the treasures and things happen, because I haven't delved deep enough into, scenario after scenario after scenario to see, okay, I got all these treasures and here's already building up. That is the bulk of the character progression, it seems, because the treasures are where you're building you're getting your enhancements. There aren't upgradable cards. There aren't upgradable abilities. There's no experience points. There's no gold. And that's an interesting part of a dungeon crawler, in the fact that you're just trying to, to get these treasures, which have some risk reward depending on how you're drawing, etc. But when you kill an enemy, you're not gaining experience. And that was an interesting and a different change. It's not like I've got to mop up to try to maximize anything so I can go up a level. That's not the way this game is. And so that is something you have to look at. Like, is it something that would be, do I really love that? Or am I more a fan of the puzzly nature and getting some treasures that could be really cool and could be very helpful, and etc. So there is a little bit of that. However, what that does is it lets you swap characters really easy with different combinations. So I can put these two characters with this one, or I can draw, this next scenario, I'll put these three together. And you don't lose anything because your treasure and the things you have stays with your campaign. But it's not like, oh, I have to then like up level my people or this, that. So it just gives you a little more flexibility to try out different things. And I think that's really cool. And that's a benefit. So I'd say, I personally like leveling up characters and the character progression and things, but I'm trading that this time to be able to do different combinations. And that is in a lot of ways a little more enticing because many times I don't play through a campaign game more than once or twice, and I don't see all the characters, or it takes a long time to get a feel for them all because they want you to use the same one over and over, from step to step. Classic example of that would be the Lord of the Rings adventure game, right? Or Journeys Through Middle-earth, pardon me. The situation there is you're really kind of using the same couple of characters through that entire 12 episode campaign. That's a pretty big commitment. Now they grow and they level, and that's really cool, and I like all that. But there's a ton of characters I've never even played with because I didn't have them in my party. So that's a little bit of a benefit there. I would say that this is a pretty good recommended dungeon crawler for me, for most people who are looking for more than just an Ameritrash dice rolling thing. If you want dice rolling, there is no dice rolling in this game. If you want the idea of just delivering huge amounts of damage, it's not going to happen. This is more of a puzzly Euro dungeon crawling game, which speaks to my heart because I really like that kind of thing. I don't have the desire to own the heavy dice rolling kinds of games as much as I used to. I like the puzzle aspect. I like the idea of pulling off sweet combos versus just throwing a bunch of dice. I like throwing dice, don't get me wrong, but I've been there, done that with the fantasy thing. So this provides something very unique. I don't think it's going to be for everybody, though, because of that uniqueness. I think that it's an interesting bridge between two genres. So if you want that, you're going to feel, oh, I'm missing that part of this. However, the way the card play goes and the way the puzzle goes in this game, I think there's an awful lot of enjoyment for those who are looking for more of a Euro-style dungeon crawler. So those people, I could definitely recommend this game to, and luckily I'm one of those people. So I'm going to very much enjoy it. I really, I like the ideas of putting different characters together. And also what I didn't mention too is when you spawn enemies, you get to choose whichever enemy you want from that spawn pool, which makes a big difference. Because you have different enemies in the pool, and well, why don't I just choose all the easy ones? Oh, well, you could, but then you're going to have this huge run of hard ones that you might get overrun after these things spawn. So you might need to take some time to feather in different enemies so that you're not just going to be, bulldozed at some point. Maybe you can do that. Again, it's all about that puzzle, which I think is really cool. So that's Perdition's Mouth, Abyssal Rift. I'm very much enjoying this game, and I hope that this has been a helpful thing for you to see. This is an older game. I think it came out in 2016, and then it was revised in 2018. So it's been around for a while. There's a lot of content out there. What I showed you is just from the base game. But there's a lot to like here. There really is. So thanks again for watching. I really appreciate it. Whatever you do in the future, I really hope you have a fantastic time doing it. Take it easy.